that probably is a good segue into our resume rankings. We got 2 Pac-12 teams in this week's resume rankings. We're doing the top 10. Now remember, this is the ranking that does not take into account preseason hype. It is only what you've done in the 2023 season. So that's why it took until last week for Georgia to get in. Georgia's still in, by the way. The Vandy game didn't knock Georgia out, but it did knock Georgia down a little bit. But let's start at number 10. We got Texas at number 10. One of 2 teams with a loss in this week's top 10 resume rankings. Texas, they've got a pretty clear path to a rematch with Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game. If they don't lose again, they will play Oklahoma. The Big 12 title will be on the line, and a playoff berth could be on the line, probably will be on the line. So this is really the test coming up. Is Texas different this year than it was the last 10 or so years? Because the Texas of the last 10 or so years would drop 1 or 2 of these games. This version of Texas, if it doesn't, that's proof. That's different. One that I think is really interesting, and I mentioned this with Jesse Simonton when we were going through the games on Saturday. November 4th against Kansas State. Kansas State sure looked like they handed the offense over to Avery Johnson against Texas Tech. Perhaps Chris Kleiman goes back and Will Howard resumes his normal role. But Avery Johnson played all but one series in the second half against Texas Tech. He ran for 5 touchdowns in that game. He's super fast. He's a 5-star true freshman quarterback. He changes the math a little bit. So watch that one, because I really think Texas should roll through this. I think they're good enough to roll through this. They're at Houston this week, which is Houston's coming off that crazy Hail Mary win against West Virginia. This is a huge game for Houston because Texas has to come to their stadium. It's the only time they'll meet as Big 12 opponents, but Texas is a lot better. So all Texas has to do is keep winning games. Number 9, the Oregon Ducks. I looked at the AP poll this week, and I appreciated what the voters did, because it drives me nuts when you have a matchup of 2 really good teams and the lower ranked team loses and then plummets in the polls. Because it doesn't make sense to me. If they were ranked lower in the first place, they shouldn't drop very much, because all they did was reinforce what you thought. Especially in this case, it was a 3-point loss. So the AP poll voters did not drop Oregon very much. They dropped 1 spot, basically. They dropped to 9. Texas is 8. So thank you, AP poll voters, for doing that, because they had Washington and Oregon 1 spot apart. They moved Washington up with the win, but they did not drop Oregon out of the top 10. So good for them. We talked a lot about the Ducks. The road ahead is hard, but who knows? Bo Nix seems to have a good head on his shoulders. Dan Lanning, I think we know what his philosophy is going to be. They're going to be aggressive. They're going to go down swinging if they're going down. We'll see what happens. Number 8, the North Carolina Tar Heels. These guys are a complete team. That Kamen Rucker interview last week, if you didn't watch that one, go back and watch it. Go to the YouTube channel. The whole thing's on there. He's awesome no matter what, but he was great against Miami. I got a text from somebody in Chapel Hill on Sunday that said, "What a game for the guy you interviewed. 2.5 sacks and 45 uncalled holding penalties." He was spectacular against Miami. But that whole defense has looked very good all season, and it makes them feel like a more complete team. Obviously, Tez Walker was the big story on Saturday night because he's ineligible. The NCAA finally rules him eligible, but it was on a Thursday, so we didn't really get to see the full Tez Walker experience against Syracuse. We definitely got to see it against Miami. I'm really rooting for a North Carolina-Florida State ACC championship game with a playoff berth on the line, because I think that could be a great game. That matchup could be so much fun. Jordan Travis, Drake May, Tez Walker, Keon Coleman. Hey, come on. Jared Verse, Kamen Rucker. That's going to be a good one. I think that's your ACC championship game. I'm pretty sure it is. but I'd like it to be between two undefeated teams. We'll see if that can happen. It'd be the best ACC championship game ever. Be everything they envisioned, I think, when they went to divisions. This is not divisions, but when they instituted the championship game, everything they envisioned, but never actually got. Number 7, Penn State. That 31-0 domination of Iowa looks better and better every week. The West Virginia win obviously looks nice still, even though West Virginia lost on a Hail Mary the other night. Doesn't really matter. None of it really matters. They're going to Columbus. Can they beat Ohio State? Can Drew Aller throw it deep, or will he check it down, or does it matter? Will Penn State's defense harass Kyle McCord, force him to make mistakes? This is where Penn State has to perform. This game, the Michigan game, because this is big. We're going to talk to Sean Fitz from Blue White Illustrated later in the show, and he's been banging the drum that this is the difference. These games are the difference between whether Penn State is a good team that is a notch below the Ohio States and the Michigans of the world, or whether they belong with the Ohio States and the Michigans of the world. We'll see what happens. Number 6, that's Ohio State. That the Notre Dame win looks much better with Notre Dame whipping USC like that. But again, with Ohio State, it doesn't mean anything because they got to play Penn State. They beat Penn State, then it's get through to Michigan. They don't beat Penn State, then it's also get through to Michigan, and you got to beat Michigan. But this is going to be a really fun one. Penn State and Ohio State play close. It's not like Penn State and Michigan, where if the game's in Ann Arbor, Penn State doesn't seem to ever have a chance. This has been close everywhere it's been played. These teams feel pretty close. And it really will come down to probably who forces the first-time starting quarterback to make more mistakes. But it's going to be a big one. Number 5, the Georgia Bulldogs. Sleepwalking at Vanderbilt, 11 a.m. local kickoff. I get it. It happens. Brock Bowers left with an ankle injury. They said that the x-rays are negative. Probably could have him back, they hope, by the time they play Florida. Remember, they're off this week, and they play Florida on the 28th. So we will see what happens there. But Georgia, they had the Kentucky win, which looked good. Looks less good after Missouri went out and beat Kentucky. But here's the thing. Florida's 4-2. We know Florida isn't expected to win many more games this season because the schedule gets very hard. But they're 4-2 right now. It's a rivalry game. Both teams coming off an open date. And then they've got Ole Miss, which has been good this season. Missouri, which has been very good this season. So Georgia's going to have a chance to get some better wins than it has on the resume right now. They can obviously move back up. And here's the thing. As long as Georgia can play the way it played against Kentucky when it matters, Georgia's fine. Georgia will three-peat if they do that. But the sleepwalking thing, the slow start thing, it's real, and they got to be careful with that. Number 4, Florida State. Seminoles just rolled through Syracuse. The only drama was Jordan Travis getting hurt right at the end of the first half, but he came back and played in the second half. Looked like he did something to his left arm. This team seems to be firing on all cylinders. They've got Duke this week. We'll see if they wind up playing against Riley Leonard. Vegas didn't have a lot of faith in Duke, as you'll see. We're going to talk about some of the juicy early lines later in the show, but Vegas was not optimistic about Duke. Number 3, Michigan. They haven't played anybody yet, but they beat everybody the same way. They just pound them. Indiana goes up 7-0. We're like, okay, maybe this is the time somebody challenges them. Nope. Michigan scores the next 52 points. Until they show a vulnerability, who they've played doesn't even matter because they just keep doing this over and over again. Obviously, it comes down to the Penn State game and the Ohio State game. You're sensing a theme here in the Big Ten. But if they keep doing this, it won't matter. They'll do that to everybody. Maybe not win by as much against Penn State and Ohio State, but the way they're playing, it's going to be very hard for anybody to beat them. Number 2, the Washington Huskies, second best win of the season. Still think the Oklahoma win against Texas is number one. But beating Oregon was spectacular. Michael Penix Jr. rose to the occasion when he got the ball back, brought him down the field very quickly. It was a lot of fun to watch, and I can't wait to watch them the rest of the way. As we just talked about, the rest of the Pac-12 race is going to be bonkers. Number one, still Oklahoma. Oklahoma in the very good position of having the best win. Also should be favored the rest of the way in the regular season. Now, as far as the resume ranking goes, this actually probably puts them in a position to get hopped, because I just mentioned Michigan's going to play tougher games. I just mentioned Georgia's going to play tougher games, and Washington is going to play tougher games. So all of them could potentially hop Oklahoma, because Oklahoma has not had to play anybody really good but Texas. So we'll see how they do the rest of the year. But they have been beating people in a similar fashion pretty much every time. And obviously Texas was tougher because Texas is a much better team. But they have been absolutely fine. So that is your resume rank. Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.